David and Cynthia McAuley, who are the creators, the brains behind Watershed Cohousing, which is located here in the town I live in, which is in Guelph. I met David and Cynthia through a community event last fall, I think it was, which was actually a co-housing community event, which is a group of people all coming. It was more of an intentional community event at a local festival that we had going on in here in Guelph. And I have since been to Watershed Cohousing's open house and received a couple tours. And so we're happy to invite, have David and Cynthia speak to us today about the journey they've been on. So I thought how we'd start, I know you have some slides to share, David and Cynthia, but I wanted to start with just kind of having you both maybe give an introduction to who you are, that you actually do live together, you are a couple, and then also just kind of a general introduction on how Watershed Cohousing came to be. So where did that idea start from? And then I'll just let you take over from there on the slides that you have prepared for us.
I'll let Cynthia go first.
Oh, I was going to ask if you wanted to. Well, yes, I came along this journey with David, who has talked about co-housing forever. And while I wasn't as familiar with it as I certainly am now, I really loved the principle, and right now I'm very thankful that we've gone on this journey. We still have a lot to learn, and it sounds like to me that a lot of you are ahead of us in many ways insofar as your governance and circles and sociocracy. So that's what we're loving too, is being able to share with other communities and learn from each other. So we have, there's a few things I could share with you that I learned along the way, but I'll let David do the introduction first.
Okay, and my introduction to co-housing was about 15 years ago, I guess. And I ran into a builder and a realtor friends of mine, and they talked about using or finding a piece of property and turning it into co-housing and living together and that type of thing, and all the advantages we mostly know. And I said, well, we have to get the people together. So we eventually, after several kind of encounters like that, we said, well, let's get a meeting together and set a date and invite everybody we know. We did that. We had over 20 people show up at a house. And then it kind of formed into a group. And we went very far with that group. And eventually it seemed to be falling apart. And so we decided to do it with our own property, which we managed, and we could basically start it, and we knew we had a site that could be rezoned and that type of thing. So we went ahead and did that, and that became Watershed Cohousing. The one that I had floundered has actually become now Grassroots Cohousing, so I'll talk about that one as well.
And David, can you give the group some background about you, yourself, and your what you do that helped move things, and also two parts to that question actually, that also helped move things quicker. Not only did you own the property, but having your background. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, I'm a semi-retired architect. I've done a lot of buildings around Ontario for about 50 years actually. And so I kind of came to co-housing from the angle of healthy buildings and building designs for communities and not-for-profits. So most of my work, the majority of my work over the period of my career has been for not-for-profits, and certainly affordable housing as part of that. I continue to work on a few projects that way. So I'm associated with a number of firms in different areas and different projects.
And so had you, David, worked on any co-housing projects before, not only doing your own, but on your own property?
No, well, Watershed was my own property.
Yeah.
The Grassroots project, which previously had been called SILK, Sustainable Intentional Living Community, and then it became Speedville Co-Housing. And I worked as an architect then on that project to take it through zone change and official plan amendment and a design process. And we had about 19 people participating in the design process. And just in a nutshell, basically, it kind of came to the terms of where we had to have significant money for the project to pursue it. People kind of walked away and they got a little gun shy, I guess. They weren't willing to put the money on the table and make the serious commitment. by selling their houses and carrying on with the project to continue through the design and the approval process. So it went as far as the owners could go currently with it. And then basically a group from Kitchener came to join. They had been looking for land for at least 10 years. And so most of them decided to come over to Guelph, where we already had the property and they had the zoning for it and the approvals, and they basically just need to have the community and the people. So they're in the process of merging those two groups together, and they're going to be having their first formal meeting with, we do have a design now that's on the table, and I can show you what that is. But basically they're going to be moving together to merge the two groups together as a formal group and site. So it's bringing things together.
Okay, so just to confirm for everyone, there's actually two co-housing groups in Guelph. So there's one that David and Cynthia have created, which is their own property, which we'll talk more about, and that's called Watershed Cohousing. The second group that David gave you some history on was originally called Silk, is now called, help me, David, I forgot their new name.
Grassroots.
Grassroots, ROUTES,
Correct.
roots, co-housing. So Guelph has one co-housing community that's up and going, that's built, which David and Cynthia are here to represent, Watershed Cohousing. And they have a second one that's in the works called Grassroots, that David and Cynthia were originally a part of and are still connected with. You still are working with them, and David, you're helping them.
Very much.
So you're still all part of the same community. However, it's not like Watershed 1 and Watershed 2. They are very different groups. So going back to Watershed Cohousing, and your actual property, this was your family property that you raised your children in. Could you give us some background on how that came to be when you decide, when the Silk group was kind of falling apart before it became the Grassroots that they are now, and you and Cynthia and others came forward with your own property to use for co-housing? And if you could explain that and this, maybe get into some of the size, and that maybe when you want to bring in some of your slides.
Yeah. So this is a place where I own since 1981. I moved my architectural practice into this building and my kids. So we lived and worked in the same place. We had up to 13 people, I think we did, working here. And I had a retirement plan. And part of that retirement plan was to go to co-housing. As I mentioned before, the now Grassroots wasn't materializing. So I decided, well, I do have control over my own property, so I can do what I want with it, essentially. So we went through that. And it's not uncommon to do this. I know several other communities where a member or a person with land that is suitable or land assembled. And it's the same thing with Grassroots. It's Mike Fortin and Vicky Beard, who own 5 properties independently they've acquired, and they're doing the same thing. So they'll be part of the community. So it's something to look for if you're looking for property, is to look for people who have some property that might be suitable for rezoning and is sized enough that they can build on it for development of co-housing, and they're committed to the cause. So, and educated in that. So I know of several. I've visited over 20 co-housing communities, and you'd be surprised at the number where somebody does come to the table with land and with the intent of joining a community as a founder. So anyway, we did this. It took about 10 years. We had to go through a zone change. It was appealed by neighbors, or a neighbor, to the Ontario Municipal Board. We went through that. We were successful. It cost us a lot of money, a lot of time. Anyway, it's what it is. Now it's more accepted. The problem in Ontario is that we only have 3 now co-housing communities. There's 2 in Ottawa and 1 in Guelph. Urban co-housing communities, I should say. And there are other versions of that. There are other kinds of co-housing as well. There's co-living, which is similar in some ways, but it's much smaller, and they share a kitchen. They don't have individual units, same way the co-housing does. So, and we have at least one other community in Guelph that is like that. And we have, again, a very good relationship with them.
Now, when we started, when Dave it was really his decision, to say, okay, let's do it here. Let's just do this. We had a couple of other friends who had heard us talking about this for a long time, who came on board right away. So that made life a little simpler, a little bit easier transition. But at the same time, we still needed to have more people join. It seems like you have already a great community of people. So something that drew people in was we put a big sign out front. And the minute we did that, it really was that same day, we got 2 or 3 phone calls, people saying, how do we join, whatever. So the word started to spread really through that sign.
Mm. It's all about the land, isn't it?
It really is about the land and about having people with money available. Because we had so many potlucks and we talked about so many different policies and ways of doing things, which was very great for the human journey and, expanding your own character. But when it came time to putting the money down, that's like David mentioned with the previous grassroots. So when we put up the sign with the picture of what it was going to look like, people came and said, okay. And we were fortunate to have people who could invest a few $100,000 each and who had known us too. So trusted David and the whole idea as well. So that's what really got the ball rolling.
And can you explain what this property looks like and how many units you have, those types of things?
Yeah, probably the slideshow is going to show the shape of the units. That's what they call a flagship lot. There are 6 residential units and 1 office, or actually 2 office units. So it's a mixed use. And again, there are a number of very successful co-housing communities that do have a component of either commercial on it, office uses, or I envision this as being a collaborative office space. It's turned out that most of it is rented out.
So the initial building, which is over 100 years old, has the office, the 2 offices, as well as 1 of the units. And then joined to the old building is the newer section, which has 5 units. Dave, you want to pull up that slide, David?
Yeah, or if you're okay, I'll get into the slides now.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Good.
Before we do that, though, I think, Ken, you had a question. Did you want to ask that before they pull up the slides?
Yeah, well, I was wondering about, I guess, questions in general, but one question comes to mind. David, you talked about, being committed to the cause. Does your commitment include donation of the property, or is there some way in which you extract the value of that land at some point in the project? Because as Ellen said, land is key. I mean, as soon as you have a location and, something concrete that people can sort of wrap their dreams around, that changes everything. And I think that's the challenge, right? Is coming up with, especially in the Hamilton area, any property worth developing for this purpose comes with risk and also a high price tag. So I'm just curious as to how that's sort of working in your group.
Yeah, I guess I could say very nicely, there is recognition for the donation of the property. And it's not at its market value by any means. There are chances, and we're really at a bit of a crunch right now, actually financially, but chances are the property will probably have to be a donation to the community at this particular time. Maybe sometime down the road there'll be some credit for that. But like I say, it takes a lot of dedication to donate a piece of property as well in these days, as you say.
And the individual properties right now, David, are not individually owned. There's a renting agreement going on and they're moving towards ownership, and you've had issue with people getting financing because many of them are retired without jobs. Do you want to explain that part? Yes,
so we're in the transition to a condominium. We're well along with that road, anticipating another let's say milestone the end of this week. So in the interim, to carry the loan from the construction loan to a bridge loan, basically we're having to pay some financing for the bank, and so we're having to finance that part of it. So most of the people we have are retired or semi-retired, and they don't have the income that they did have. I can certainly speak for myself because I've been donating pretty much all of my time to this project for about full-time for at least 5 years. And so because I don't have the income, the borrowing capacity and the financial institutions is very much encumbered by that. So they basically look at your ability to pay to service the loan. And even though you have the assets of the property, I thought that that would be enough, but it doesn't turn out that that's sufficient for the banks to be satisfied that you can carry a debt without the income. So, and most people are in that position where they own their own home. They come to this. Some of the people have enough investments that they can basically pay for the unit outright when it gets to a condominium. Other people are going to have to go to the bank and borrow the money. And that's where it's getting a little tight for some people to pay the market value for the properties. So we're, I guess, stick handling around that issue. So that we're having to address that, because certainly we want to keep the people who have invested in the project. So far, we have stakeholders have invested in the project, an average of about $300,000 actually. And they have put that toward the purchase of their unit, obviously. But as many people know who've been building the last few years, the construction prices have gone astronomical. So our project is probably about 30% over budget from the inception of the construction or beginning of construction through to completion. And we had no alternative but to finish the project, of course, and once we started. And so anyway, that's just the fact of life, the way things are with construction in the current market.
Something that
Cynthia, do you want to add in? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, something that some people have learned was they wish they hadn't gotten rid of their mortgage entirely, because if you owe money, they're more likely to just increase your mortgage. But a lot of people just felt good clearing off their mortgage, feeling that they would be ahead, but in the end, it worked against us. And also what we learned was to not go in talking about co-housing whatsoever, just calling it a condo straight up, because banks don't understand what a co-housing is. It makes them nervous. And if you talk condo, they understand.
Mm.
And something the two of you both told me as well is that it isn't just when people do have to go in for financing, even if it's a small amount, the banks aren't necessarily looking at their financial situation as much as the risk that's involved that go into owning a property. So it's not just the money they're going in that they think they need to finance the rest of their property. The banks are also looking at that they have, you said it, long-term borrowing potential. And the thing that both of you mentioned too is to encourage us to make sure that the people who are part of our co-housing are both employed and retired. To have that full mix of people, which I know our group is going for intergenerational, and versus your group, they're mostly all, I believe, all retired or semi-retired was the other tip you'd given.
And that was also through the design of our units.
Right.
There are quite a few families who are interested, but it wasn't quite large enough. So
yeah.
Right.
T. Crema, I'm not sure what your first name is, or is it? What's your
Trish.
name?
Trish.
Trish, you had a question?
Yeah, I think, the comment that David made, in transition to a condo. So can you just explain that? Are you moving literally to turning it into a condo?
That's correct. Yeah. So, and it's not something I would recommend. Other groups have initiated a condominium application for registration of a condominium a lot earlier than we did. But we started with a development company that owned the property, and I owned the development company. So that's what initiated the project. And as I say, the stakeholders provided financing to, I guess, supplement what we had put forward. So people are they're all committed to the project, as I say. So they're under a promissory note to the numbered company.
Okay, so that's a really key point for me in terms of, the issue. So co-housing it appears in Ontario, even for a small co-housing, like for me, that was, manageable, and an existing property, and David, you're part of the group, you even were the developer. So, the fact that you are saying, there's financial limitations still ongoing, possibly increasing, is a huge factor. So when I, first came to co-housing, I thought, okay, this is, a nonprofit, maybe not social housing alternative for seniors, but, since you all have, started out with a group of retired people and you were friends already, so that's a big factor, I think. What it turns out to be really is more of an investment choice for those who have a couple of $100,000 to spare, as you said, which is, a whole different kind of housing opportunity, especially for seniors, retired people. So multi-generational brings in a whole other, aspect of co-housing. But for me, I really appreciate that, you said that right off the bat, because that's just a different understanding of co-housing than I came in with. So thank you.
We had hoped to make it affordable, a lot more affordable. And we had actually, in our dream was to have one unit that we would all have contributed a little bit to make it affordable for somebody who couldn't. But in the end, we just haven't been able to do that. And yeah, we weren't all friends at the beginning. There were a few friends who came on, but other people who saw the sign joined in. And yeah, there was one more thing there that I just wanted to, and I think a big part of our issue is we're only 6 units. So we're all sharing the cost of, for instance, the elevator. If you're one of 20, the costs go down immensely for each unit. But for us being one of 6, it becomes pricey in many ways. And also just the timing of our build during the pandemic.
I actually like the fact, in comparison to the only other co-housing, Zoom meeting I've been on was the New Zealand example, which, was a much larger group of people, multi-generational, and yet, along with the housing bank, land, developer, construction, design issues, for me, coming from a background in community organizing originally, it's that idea of a community, a village, a group of people that can live together, share, minimize exploitation on either side. So either the younger folks not using, the older members as free daycare, and the seniors not using the younger folks as, free support, home care, whatever, right? And that whole idea of building an intentional community with people that you don't know is just a lot more difficult. So in talking to friends and so on, we all said, well, yeah, we know each other. We know our quirks and, complications. We trust each other. And that's just a much easier co-housing community to maintain. And I think the New Zealand example, a lot of the units, I think, were being rented. So there's a whole different scenario, even in condos, about renting versus owning, in terms of how they treat the property, how they treat each other, and so on and so forth. So all of those things are really important.
They are, Trish, and I know everybody knows in the co-housing group directly, I'm the biggest proponent of this, of how we can make this affordable, how we can accommodate people who don't have 300,000 in their back pocket, of which I am not one of those people. I don't own a home currently that has lots of equity in it. So this is a different discussion, Trish. If you want, I can talk with you separately. Because there's lots of different ways to do co-housing. For instance, we featured in this group a group out of Austria, and they are fully rental only, and they have affordable units. So there's all kinds of different ways. But maybe we'll get back to Watershed in particular. But these are all really good points, and there's kind of different ways of looking at. There's the more condo-based co-housing, and then there's a whole bunch of other different models that have come to be based on trying to solve this problem. I think this is one of the most difficult times from what I've learned, and I've been looking into co-housing for about 10 to 15 years, for people to get co-housing communities off the ground because of land costs and affordability problems. Ken, you had a question? Thank you, Trish.
Yeah, just a quick question for David. As you sort of journey towards a condominium structure, have you established the value of individual units?
We're in the process of doing that now, and as we transition from, you can call it rental, but basically what the rent is covering is the mortgage costs and the cost of the common spaces. So as we transition to that, we're having appraisals, real estate opinions of value. We're getting 3 of them, and we'll probably average those in the end to find out what the fair market value is of the properties as we transition to ownership. And again, all of this is negotiable. But the arching thing, again, as Trish was saying, is you have a community together, and you really have to practice sociocracy and working as a community rather than working as individuals. So that's the education, and that's the strength of co-housing, is you have to pull some of the people along who can't afford it, but they have other attributes, let's say, or other talents. So I think you want to have a mixture of people. Obviously, some people with the ability to raise the funds, but it doesn't necessarily have to be 100% of all the people. Or you just have rental units, or you have other units that are available with other levels of membership even. So, you know, it's a question of working as a group, and the sooner you start to work as a group and you do the training that's needed, certainly in the design of the project and selecting a site and the stage that you are at now, is it's a way of bringing the group together. And you have to practice this. I would say that, I mean, we're learning to be a family, basically, as a community, and learning a lot about the other people and how to work with the groups. And it is a different mindset than, you know, the traditional North American way of, you know, everybody's out for themselves. So the community has to have all of the priority as you're making all your decisions.
Right. And I think the key that you've just called out is we all bring different things to the table. And especially if you go for an intergenerational model, you end up with people who are very skilled at cleaning all the snow off the driveway, yet somebody else with a space versus others that may not, you know, maybe beyond that at their stages, just using a small example. So that's good. Just a quick question for you, David, to confirm, Watershed Cohousing is not a nonprofit, correct?
It is
the corporation is yours.
It's not a not-for-profit corporation, but it's
Okay.
definitely not an organization that's going to show a profit soon.
Right. But to clarify, the corporation that you spoke about, the numbered company, that's your own company, correct?
It
That's
is,
paying
yeah.
currently. Okay. So that at no point did you ever create a corporation for Watershed Cohousing, whether nonprofit or not?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay.
It's less than not-for-profit.
Okay. Would you, in retrospect, I mean, this was one of the questions I had around your biggest struggles, but have created a nonprofit? Do you think that could have made things easier for you? Trish, did you have another question, or did you just still have your hands up, by the way? Your hand up. You still had your hand up. Okay. So would you have considered that in one of your lessons learned?
It did come up, some of the people suggested it, but it just seemed to me that if the advantages versus the disadvantages, it got a lot more complicated in terms of financing and accounting and that type of thing to have a not-for-profit in terms of reporting. And it just didn't seem that when it was brought up that it was too late to start to get into restructuring the whole development corporation.
Right, because
So
you had
we
it
didn't want to
existing.
change it.
Right, you had one existing that,
Yeah.
and did you have anybody in your group who had an area of expertise in nonprofit, either creation or managing or?
I don't think so. I know I've been part of a not-for-profit on the board, but that was a long time ago. No, I mean, this is the other good thing, really, you have to look in your membership, you have to look for people who have a broad range of talents, let's say, and abilities. And accounting is one of them that we basically looked at each other and nobody really had accounting or financial background or strengths, let's say. So we've had to pay accountants and bookkeepers to do a lot of that work. So look at the key people who are interested in development, risk takers, people who know land, engineers, architects, obviously very common. But also builders, people who can, eventually change the light bulbs when you're there. So, you really should consider that in your membership and give priority to some of the people, especially the financial part. But that was our weak link all the way through and still is today.
And when you say in your membership, do you mean in your direct membership or as partners? Because I know Cohousing Hamilton, we're trying to build out our partnerships.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're small enough. I mean, if one of the six of us, and one of the people is doing the bookkeeping now, but she's kind of training under our accountant. It would be good to have somebody with experience in accounting or has run their own business is always helpful too. So yeah, I mean, because you can hire anybody to do anything, right? So if you have to pay people to do this at their hourly rates for professionals, then you're gonna be bleeding a lot of money really quickly.
It adds up quick, I know, yeah.
Oh,
Okay, did anybody have any other questions before we go into their slides that they've created for us?
I'm keen to see the slides.
Yeah, Dave, I might suggest you just skip to the slides that are about Watershed.
So I can go pretty quickly through this. I keep going in and out of this. Anyway, here we are. So just to begin with, it has to start and center around.
We
the
don't see your
people who-
screen yet, David.
Oh, do we not? Okay. I guess I'm not in the share yet. Here we go. Are we there now?
No,
Not,
Not yet.
Yes?
no,
Nope.
No? I don't know why. I'm in share.
there you are.
Okay, you're there. Now we just
Getting
need to
there.
see your slides. Yep. There you go. Just pop
Okay.
the PowerPoint.
Are we there now?
Yeah,
Yes.
just make it bigger. There we go.
There we
Perfect.
go. Okay.
Good.
I'm gonna go flying through this really quickly. I started with the people. We look at diversified people, seniors, anybody, and you know all this. In terms of the ownership can be freehold, condominium, cooperative. Usually, though, it's one of those three. Rental is also another option, but you'd have to have a development company that would be able to carry the project all the way through. In terms of the location, rural, one advantage of that would be Whole Village, which is near Orange. Terra Firma is in Ottawa, and Solterra is a suburban, so you can get any of that. The look of co-housing is very different than traditional housing. Traditional housing sort of has the street in the front yard and the backyard and the private spaces in the backyard sort of thing. Whereas co-housing is a lot more organic, let's say, in terms of having a common yard in the center and everybody's kind of around that with the common facilities. So it engages people at the entrance at the common house, and all the outdoor and indoor areas become part of that. Building types can be almost any building type. It's not recognizable at any particular type of building. So they can be a free-standing building. They can be townhouses. The top right is terra firma. Some of the others are more like apartment buildings or linked homes, interior courtyards and that type of thing. Apartment buildings are very common for urban areas, obviously, and especially with the land costs. You want to increase the density. This is one that's kind of a mixed use. It's fairly small. It's in Seattle. They have 2-bedroom units plus office space integral with that. Outdoor spaces are very important. So the communal spaces have to be combined inside and outside for all times of the year. So there's common space for everybody, kitchen, gathering areas, all the way through to individual spaces. And the individual spaces, of course, are a lot smaller. So I think you've been down the road of core values, mission, vision, and objectives. So I'm not going to get into that. You spend a lot of time, in workshops and pulling that together. But it's important to have those and to go back using that for decision-making processes. So look at your resources. As I say, visit communities. We took a camping trip with a bunch of people and learned a lot about them. We took sociocracy, nonviolent communication courses. This is as the group that became, eventually Grassroots, but there's 3 families that actually became part of Watershed as well, including Cynthia and myself. The process is the finances, again, a very important part of it, looking at the assets and the borrowing capacity of everybody. And land acquisition is not necessarily the first thing, but it certainly brings things together once you get a piece of property. And like I say, with people who own the property, if they're willing to carry the property through the process of getting approvals and the design, that's a big thing. If you have to carry the price of property to go through, 5 or 10 years in our case, to carry that through the approvals, it gets very costly for everybody. We certainly have design pros as far as the process to design charrettes that pull this together. We do a collaborative using a co-housing consultant and/or architect, bringing all this together. Now down to Watershed. This is Watershed. It's at the corner of Woolwich Street and Mont Street in Guelph. And I don't know if this pointer is here. That's Woolwich Street here. Mont Street is a side street, and it's this L-shaped property. And so this is the existing building. This is the additions. So on the ground floor, there's 1 unit. On the second floor, 2 units. Third floor, 2 units. And then in the existing building, on the ground floor is offices. On the second floor is an apartment, number 6. And the common space is on the 3rd floor and in the basement of the existing building for the most part. There's a bike storage room here, parking for 9 parking spaces back here. And you access that by driving underneath the 2nd floor of the building. So as I say, there's 1 on the ground floor, 2 on the 2nd, 2 on the 3rd. This is a common stairwell. This is where the elevator is inside here in the front lobby. And this is the existing building, the 1897 offices on the ground floor, unit on the 2nd floor, 20 by 40 foot room on the 3rd floor. So it's a very high level of healthy buildings, passive house criteria, net zero, ready. Grassroots co-housing is a very different property. It's about a kilometer away from where we are at Watershed. It's 24 units, 1 to 3 bedrooms. There's an urban woodlot. So this is the main street on the side here, Speedville Avenue. And then on the side of that is Delhi Street. There's an existing house that's going to remain here. And then we're building a new building for 22 units here. And this is an urban woodlot. It's a beautiful property, and we're trying to get as many of the units oriented to that. So we're in the design stage for this now, getting ready for construction, probably in a couple of years, I would say. So the financial advantages, I don't need to go into a lot of detail with this. There's certainly some disadvantages too, but certainly we can go with smaller unit sizes, lower utilities. The actual savings for co-housing are in the operating costs once the units are built. But by and large, every community we've talked to, the units are comparable to existing units in the community. If it's a 2-bedroom and it's let's say $700,000, then a two-bedroom in co-housing would probably be the same. But when it gets into the operating costs, it's much lower. So you're sharing bulk purchasing, cars, you have a higher density, you have childcare and elder care, environmentally sustainable, where you wouldn't have that in the normal community. We don't have comparables for the real estate agents. That's been a real, I guess, understanding or education for them to say, well, there is a value in living in community. And they're trying to say, well, what's the value in living in community? So we talk about these things and saying, well, it definitely is people's advantage once they get moved in. A lot of opportunities, partnerships with developers, for instance, larger developments. So there's, I'm actually working with a 3rd co-housing community in Guelph, and it's under the auspices of Habitat for Humanity. So there'll be 100 units on the site, and there'll be 40 units of co-housing. And so the rest of it will be affordable housing with Habitat. So there are churches that have land. We've talked about that. There are developers who have properties as well. Whether they're ready to let them go at, let's say, a better rate is the big question. Lots of resources with Communities Magazine and other websites and events. Certainly visiting, I'd highly recommend that. There's lots of books on the subject. And lots of people available, as you know, to speak. So I basically just turn it over to that, and happy to answer any further questions. And certainly I'm available after if people have follow-up questions or issues they want to raise.
And
So that was a rattling
Yeah,
through.
David.
Mhm.
No, that's great. It gives us a
Really
quick overview. I guess my question has to do with establishing or the real world is, of finance and real estate values and so on is going to want to know what values are, and quantifying the co-housing benefit of this type of lifestyle is, I think it would be a really worthwhile project. I just wondered if you had any thoughts on how to go about doing that. When you establish, for instance, a car park of 5 or 6 cars that everybody, a car share park that everybody shares, there's obviously a cost benefit to that, and putting a value to that, in a way that shows this type of housing as being more affordable because of its nature, would be really beneficial.
Yeah, and I understand that Canadian Co-housing Network is doing that exact thing. The advantage that they have, of course, being centered in BC, is that they have probably 20 co-housing communities in BC. And when we were looking for financing for construction, we were contacting the same people, the same institutions, financial institutions, and they gave us a flat no for Ontario, whereas we know for sure that they're being financed in BC with the people. So one thing that we did find out is there are co-housing consultants that know how to present this to the financial institutions. So that's something we don't have in Ontario, really, is the I guess the depth or the selection of co-housing consultants that they have in BC who actually go to bat for you to the financial institutions, and you get a totally different reaction from even the same banks and financial institutions. So I'm not sure that that's answering your question, Ken, but for sure there are advantage, and the more of them there are, the easier it's going to be, of course, because we've got other examples that they can come to, and they can look at the financials for our institution or the ones in Ottawa and make decisions on that basis. The other thing that they can do too, that I know is happening in BC as well, is they're doing it kind of as other communities are providing not only advice like I'm doing tonight, but also the potential of financial assistance in launching co-housing communities. So I think the more we work together and the more communities that are involved, the strength is going to be there. And when we go to realtors, and when we go to developers, and when we go to financial institutions and builders even, we'll have more contacts in line. And the same thing we're finding now too with consultants. I mean, although the electrical consultants or the structural consultants really don't care. It's a building, it's a building, it's a building. But certainly as far as the design is concerned with architects, there's more and more architects. I've had a lot of interest from universities, schools of architecture, for students who want to learn about co-housing and intend to get into it in a design sense. So the younger generation is very much interested in co-housing as a lifestyle.
Well, and the younger generation could benefit from being able to demonstrate co-housing as a more affordable lifestyle. And I guess I'm glad to hear that it sounds like there's work being done towards that. And
yes, the early days.
Yeah, and David, going back to co-housing consultants, you mentioned to me that not only is it important to work with consultants who have local knowledge in the community you're working in, but also to have consultants who have direct co-housing experience, like an actual success record of building up co-housing communities. Does that mean that groups should go to people like co-housing groups and co-housing consultant groups in BC who have more experience? Is that what you're saying? Or what is the offset between local and co-housing?
We've tried to do that, and basically there's a reluctance. Obviously, they're busy enough in BC, and some of the consultants, the best ones, are kind of burned out. It's hard to get them to come to Ontario and try to do the same thing. And the rules are very different too, where we've engaged other people or other communities have brought people from out of the province. They're a little bit lost when it comes to approval process. The site plan approval process in Ontario and most municipalities is quite formidable for people who are outside. They have no idea. We've had planners actually come in from out of province, and they come to Ontario and they just look at this. And as much as, you know, our politicians are saying they want to build and develop housing and that type of thing, there's still a lot of processes that are new. And if you don't have people who are locally involved and obviously in the build, if they can design a building, you know, well, it's the design as well, because obviously it's the climatic thing, but it's also knowing the trades and the builders and the approvals and the building departments. Codes are somewhat different in some places as well. So, and then of course, through construction, you want to have your consultants on site. So if you go hiring people who don't have experience locally, and the network of builders, I mean, you know, that I have worked with, for instance, it's a question of talking them into building, because sometimes builders are reluctant to work for a group that's, let's say, you know, not as organized as some of the larger institutions or builders, you know, developers are. So there's a lot of advantages to dealing with somebody, you know, in Ontario and who has built. I've designed buildings in over 200 municipalities in Ontario, so I have a pretty good idea what it is, and the provincial laws are pretty much prevalent across the province.
Okay. So what you're saying is it's important to have the local on the ground knowledge around the planning, zoning, the connections to the builders, developers, whoever might be. And
Yeah.
then going back to the co-housing consultants, I know your group had a bad experience with a co-housing consultant. What's your recommendation on that, of those who have actually consulted directly on co-housing communities? Where do those people exist?
We're trying
We
to
only
get it
have
to
3
work
in Ontario.
with co-housing consultants elsewhere. I've taken courses. I've done as much visiting as I can personally, and I've taken courses with Chuck Durrett, for instance, who's written probably at least a dozen books on co-housing, probably well known as an author on co-housing. He's an architect in California currently. And so there are a few people like him who have designed excellent buildings. So we can bring them in. They'll come in for, I don't know, I think we found Chuck was more like, I think it was $10,000 he wanted to come and attend a meeting to speak to us. And we said, well, we don't have that kind of money. So, but he will do a you know, a virtual meeting and things like that. He's all over the States, but Canada, of course, he's not licensed. That's the other thing, just to have somebody who's licensed in Ontario too.
But again, for now, I would say, like, we can learn from each other, and, you know, just meeting like this and that sort of thing. But really, the first thing would be to do is to get the property. And once you get that, yeah, until you have somebody who says, yes, okay, I'm going to, anyway, that's what we found. Even when we were traveling through the States, people said, you know, they'd gotten together and had lovely meetings and potlucks, but until 1 or 2 people grabbed the bull by the horns and said, okay, here's the land, I'm giving it, let's do it, it doesn't take off. So
Right.
unless you know somebody who's willing to, that's such a key. It really is key.
So it's
Yeah,
like the, you know, the chicken before the egg. You're saying don't jump immediately into co-housing consultant groups when you have nothing yet, and
They
pay
have-
for that when you have nothing yet.
And the property
it-
you have is really going to dictate everything else too. It's
Right.
going to dictate design and people and all that.
Yeah, and I'd have to say that I've known some co-housing groups, even in Ontario, who are barking up the wrong tree. They don't have the right property. And I see that happen too many times, where they buy the wrong piece of property. They haven't done due diligence on that by the right professionals who are accustomed to doing that type of thing. So you can end up with a piece of property that might have environmental issues, it might have planning issues, might have servicing issues, might have access issues. So there's a whole host of things. There's probably 100 things you have to consider when you look at the piece of property. So don't get tangled with a property that you can't develop, or with a developer who has a piece of property that he doesn't have the appetite to work with. So
Good
it
tips.
really depends a lot on that. So again, you know, I would talk about hiring somebody who has local experience in doing that type of thing, and ending up with the right piece of property so you don't get stuck.
And I know there are a lot of, we've experienced this local developers and planning groups that want to have a co-housing community on their website because they haven't done it yet. And they've been known for, you know, being a successful business for a period of time, but not necessarily been doing anything community related. So also trying to get some of those people that have that local experience, and they want, doesn't matter to me, they want to put us on their site as long as they give us the help that we need at a fairly decent price.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I would try to single out builders, developers who have a sustainable or a green bent to them, because they'll understand the benefits of co-housing as a lifestyle that's very sustainable and looks good for them. I've done a talk to the Passive Building Canada builders group, basically, and told them it's not about the building so much, it's about the lifestyle, because the lifestyle of living in co-housing is a lot more sustainable, and it supports the passive house, the net zero, the LEED gold, if you will, but all of those sustainable builders. So if you can single out and find developers who want to develop in a green way, they might have some opportunities and properties that would be a good site.
Great tip. Thanks, David. We have a couple minutes left. Any other questions?
I just wanted to add too, it sounds like we're being rather negative. We don't really mean to be. It's exciting, and the personal journey and the learning we all do. We never leave a meeting saying, oh, we're always so uplifted after our meetings. And even if it's been tricky discussions, it's so worth it.
I don't see it as
I wanted to
negative.
pursue that.
I don't see it as negative. I see it as realistic. And I have been in your community, and I've been there for events, and it's a wonderful community. I'm sure if anybody wants to visit, you'll have them come by and see, and the units are wonderfully designed. I know that the one thing you had trouble with, David, was most co-housing communities, at least the ones that I've been to, you walk into the common house area and then you go to your separate units. You weren't able to do that based on the design of this, but it's still a lovely setup. And it seems like the trade-off you've done is you have your shared balconies instead, where people have balconies that they share instead of the common area is wonderful as well for a shared space.
That's been huge within the neighborhood too, because we'll be sitting out there and they'll look up, they're not used to looking up and seeing folks. And so it makes for great conversations, and they come and pick our berries, and so it's a nice way of being together and too.
And I encourage all of you, if it's not that far a drive for you, to stop by, and we'll make sure, David and Cynthia, the next time you have events, we'll put it onto our mailing list so people are aware that they can stop by. Ellen, you had a question.
Yes, I just would like you to tell about, say, an evening of sharing a meal. What's that like for your community?
We have, we take turns once a month we each host a soup night. And so we just open the door and people, and so no pressure, it's just soup and bread, a little dessert, like whatever, and whoever can come. So that's sort of, we take turns once a month. And then also we do gather together for potlucks. We just had one on Sunday for different occasions, maybe somebody's birthday, and we just get all together and eat, laugh, play music.
Yes, that's what we're all looking forward to, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the whole idea of working together too, we had a work bee on Saturday, and then it was followed up by a potluck, and it was a great thing. I mean, there's so many people. I don't know how many gardeners. Probably everybody's a gardener but me, I think. And so the gardeners are, it's just blown the city away as far as how the gardens have been grown, and we have rainwater harvesting as well. So water has never been a problem for us. We're able to plant things. We have mostly edible landscaping as well, and vertical landscaping, because our property is very small. We don't have a lot of yard space, but we're using the boulevards and the front of the building as a growing space. So we have the gardens growing up, and there are a lot of things, but working together as whatever we're doing, whether it's construction, gardening, we're even taking on the snow shoveling ourselves to do it basically just by people. Certainly waste recycling, composting. There's a lot of sharing of groceries and leftovers, things like that. The food is great. I think we hardly ever have a meeting where there isn't an abundance of food there.
And when you make a pot of soup, you know somebody's just coming home from a trip or something, you leave there's some soup at their door, and it's lovely to come home to somebody giving you some baked goods or so. And that's like not even organized. That's just
It just happens because
Just
you're living
happens. It's
together.
an organic thing, yes.
Right.
exactly.
And Barb mentioned that you're downtown, right?
Yes.
So
We're
people,
10 minutes.
you didn't mention how accessible you are to amenities, but that would be a very positive feature of your
Oh.
community, right?
We walk and bike just about everywhere.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Mhm.
Yeah, we have a parking lot that could accommodate, if we're in a pinch, we could probably put 10 or 12 parking spots there. We've never been full ever, even with the office and all this is the head office for a large engineering company. And that's probably the biggest pressure we've had, but people are off-site and out and around things. The other thing is that we have an abundance of parks in this area and a whole river system. So we can access that just a block away and go right out to Guelph Lake or to downtown, the other end of the city. So even though we have a small piece of property, we have access to wildlife basically a couple blocks away along the river system. You'd think you were in the middle of Muskokas. Also, community gardens are there as well. We haven't really taken a lot of advantage of that just yet. But, and there's also parking at the parks, at the different areas.
And one of our favorite things, one of mine would be the bike room. It's just so easy to access your bike. We've seen other places where you're lifting your bike over here and squeezing. You just open the door and there's parking space for all the bikes, and it makes it so convenient to use your bike.
Mhm.
Sounds idealistic, perfect. Like I said, I do encourage, if you want, just reach out and we can give you David and Cynthia's contact information if you want to stop by. And then we'll also be sharing the next time they have an event, because they do host events that everybody's invited to. And then you can keep an eye out for the other communities that in Guelph that are being built out, so we can get some lessons learned from them as well. And also the sharing of community across lessons that we're all learning across all this. David, you wanted to say one more thing?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we have a guest room that's available as well. So in addition to, the large common room, we have a guest room, we have an art room, and the guest room has a kitchenette and bathroom to it as well. So we kind of have different policies depending who is there. If it's one of our members, then they can obviously share it. It's an extra bedroom for anybody. It's also available. Somebody's renting it, I think, next weekend for a workshop for one of the neighbors who's in business. So they're using it for that. And we're charging $50 for that just to cover some of the expenses. So, but if any of you are available, we'd probably have a very discount rate.
And just one more thing, and when you come, we really learned that people bringing their partners and including their partners with it all is really, really quite key. Because there were some people who were just sort of representing their family, their unit, but then once we got to all get together, and I don't know, I just felt that was a really nice thing when everybody came together, and yeah, so bring your partners with you if you have one.
Yeah, and I think that was a point we were going to make, is that in your community, partners contributed in various different aspects. So as you were building out your community, you got to know the partners as well as you got to know, let's say in your case, David, the architect. You also got to know Cynthia, who is contributing in other ways other than architecture. So you were equally
Feeding the architect.
Yeah. And so getting to know the other half of the people that are building this is super, super important. I remember you saying, and surprising that you heard that other co-housing communities, you only hear from one half as the main person. I remember mentioning that to you and you were like, really? That doesn't happen with us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Any other final questions, comments? I know we've gone a few minutes over. This has been really good.